Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Five Stars Tonight. My name is Sydney Hunt. I'm an editor and writer at Dirty South Soccer, SB Nation's home for all things Atlanta United. Also write for MLSsoccer.com. Whether you're joining us on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, we're so glad you can join us this evening. Friday, September 24th, 2021. It is fall. The weather is cooling down, at least here in Atlanta. Beautiful days recently here in the Atlanta area. Really have enjoyed them personally. And with the fall weather here, that means one thing. That means that the playoffs are fast approaching in MLS. Atlanta United have 9 matches remaining on their schedule. Hard to believe, but it is in single digits, the number of matches it has remaining on its schedule. And of course, Five Stars are on a torrid run of form of late. They have won 7 of their last 8. They look to make it 8 of their last 9 tomorrow afternoon at Subaru Park in Chester, Pennsylvania, as they take on the Philadelphia Union. 3:30 kickoff on Univision, to the NA, and on Twitter in English. Philly right now are looking for their first win in 5 matches. They are winless in the last 5 matches across all competitions. And to help me talk about the Union is a person that really needs no introduction. He is Jonathan Tannenwald. Jonathan is my guest tonight on Five Stripes Tonight. Thanks so much for joining me, Jonathan. How are you?
I'm muted. That's the answer.
There we go.
I'm doing fine. Thank you. In fact, though, the Union won their last game. Now I don't know whether it counts in Atlanta because it was against Orlando, but they did win their last game.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I was looking at that wrong. So I apologize. We're off to a great start. But yeah, 3-1, of course, the win against Orlando City SC, who are really on shaky ground. Orlando are. So, we'll see what happens with them, in the coming matches. But yeah, let's talk about Philadelphia. Again, winning their last match. Before that, had gotten winless in their last 4. That included the CONCACAF Champions League match against Club America, 2-0 loss there. So what are your impressions of Philly right now and how things are going with this playoff run about to start for them?
They're about they are what we thought they were. I've heard that. Some of your listeners might have heard that phrase before.
Sounds familiar.
Or twice, yes. I didn't think they were necessarily going to contend for a trophy this season because they sold Brendan Aronson and Mark McKenzie, who were both terrific, and Ray Gaddis retired. And that's, in fact, a lot to make up. And I think that some Union fans, as is the nature of Philadelphians and this is the nature of American sports fans generally, said, well, we made the first round of the playoffs this year, so we're going to make the second round of the playoffs next year, and so on and so forth. You know what I mean?
Right.
It doesn't work like that in this league where you sell players, or in the case of Ray Gaddis, one of them retires. So they're about where I thought they'd be. They're good. They're not great. They're not as good as I think they can be, and Jim Curtin will be the first person to tell you that. I thought the Orlando win was significant for one very particular reason, which is we know the symptoms of the CONCACAF Champions League hangover in this league. And the Union had just come off being eliminated in the Champions League by Club America.
Right.
And we weren't really sure how they were going to play in their next game. Well, what did they do? They go out and authored what was, I think, fair to say, a statement win. It wasn't always pretty, but they won the game, and they won it fairly decisively in the end, and they all said afterward that they really needed that, and I think they were right.
Right. So does that say more about Philly and the state of how Philly's doing right now, more than it says about Orlando City, who, as I kind of mentioned, are kind of really shaky run of form of late? Does that flatter Philly more, or does that reflect more on how Orlando's been playing?
I think Philly's going to tell you they don't care. They just need to be winning games right now. And that's, I think that probably goes for what? Everybody from 3rd to 10th. And NYCFC have 39 points in 3rd place. Columbus in 10th have 31.
Right.
I think just about everybody in the East in that pack is going to tell you at this point, I don't really care about the other team. I just got to go win games right now.
Yeah.
I think they're probably right.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you look at really the bottom of the standings, I mean, or the playoff standings, I should say, Atlanta, of course, 36 points, Philly 35, but then like nipping at the Union's heels, and really Atlanta's heels, 34 points, DC United, and then even looking above Atlanta, Montreal are at 37 points, Orlando's at 38, so a lot's on the line, and really, you hear the terminology 6-point match. This is really a 6-point match for really both teams.
It's up there.
Yep.
And the Union are going to play a bunch of these teams over the course of the rest of the season. Columbus, New York, Montreal, Nashville, NYCFC.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's big. And we're certainly going to learn some things, I think, certainly about the Union, especially in this game. If Joseph doesn't play and we don't learn a ton about Atlanta, well, so be it.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to learn a few things about the Union.
Yeah. And of course, as folks are tuning in, Joseph Martinez is officially questionable for tomorrow's match. A lot of chatter suggesting that he won't play tomorrow.
For me, it's questionable as to whether he'll start, as the saying goes, Questionable as to what the other 4 hands in your poker hand are.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And for Atlanta's part, they understand obviously how important Joseph is to a potential playoff run. So, I mean, and personally, it wouldn't surprise me if Joseph didn't play. I mean, he could come on as a substitute. No, I mean, again, considering where Atlanta are and the matches coming up, that's just my opinion. But of course, we'll see what Gonzalo Pinedo's thinking tomorrow. That's just my opinion again, but we'll see. Speaking of injuries, let's talk about injuries for the Union. We know that Corey Burke won't play. We know that Ilsinho won't play. Speaking of questionable players, Ale Bedoya is questionable for tomorrow. From what you're hearing, what's kind of the status report of Bedoya? And when are the team really expecting Ilsinho and Burke back, if at all, this season?
Burke will be back, but it might be a couple weeks.
Sure.
He's got an ankle sprain.
Sure.
Ilsinho seems perpetually injured, which is a problem. And he's old, which doesn't help. Bedoya, you usually have to pull off the field with a forklift. Because he plays a lot, and that bit just dropped, and I really don't know what that's going to end up looking like in the end tomorrow. I like Quinn Sullivan, though, who's the guy who's sort of his backup, who's a young kid out of the academy, and I think Atlanta fans have probably seen some of the highlights of him, and he's a good player, and he's shown that he can play at this level, and tomorrow, if he ends up playing, is going to be a huge game for him, as a number of the other games he's played in have been.
Yeah, just another academy kid, right? I mean, Union, of course, have had a tremendous run of success with academy players in the past.
We can have that philosophical discussion if you'd like.
But I'm leading into it. This is kind of off topic for tomorrow, but I'm leading into obviously Brendan Aronson in particular, who we've seen with the U.S. men's national team. One of those players that I remember a couple of years ago at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I don't want to say
I heard about that.
Yeah, but I don't. Yeah, I mean,
I think your listeners know what happened if you're trying to avoid traumatizing them, if that is the point.
Yeah, but for someone that's covered the Union for a while. I mean, when did you kind of feel that maybe this Aronson kid could have a pretty good career, not just with the professional game, but on the national level?
I talk to Jim and to the academy coaches a few times a year about sort of who's on the way.
Sure.
And all of us who know this team well knew that Brendan was coming. It was not a surprise when he was coming up. I first wrote about him when he was 17 years old, and he had just signed his professional contract starting out in the USL. He was a known quantity coming up. And obviously the kid could play.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think, the only part of it I think we didn't expect is the pace of his growth.
Right.
Just how much farther he has gotten in the last, this calendar year since he went to Salzburg.
Yep.
Has been really impressive. But no, we knew when he was 17 that he could play.
Mm.
And I was saying to people on social media at the time, look, I don't know what this kid's ceiling is, because I don't know what any kid's ceiling is. But the kid can play, keep an eye on him.
Yep.
And because he didn't come from Dallas or Atlanta or Seattle or NYCFC or New England or Portland or Los Angeles or any number of teams that are more popularly favored among the cognoscenti, he didn't really get a ton of attention. Well, he breaks through in MLS and he does well. People in MLS know about him, obviously. Mm-hmm. And then he breaks through with the national team in the way that he has over the last few months. And I put my hand up on Twitter and said, "Hi, hello. How you doing?"
Good call. Good call.
And people still ignored that because that's sort of what they do. But the kid can play.
Mm-hmm.
And he's really good. He's got the feet and he's got the head.
Yeah.
And when you got the feet and you got the head, you can play.
Yep.
And he can play and he can do stuff.
I really enjoyed watching him. I've not just in the World Cup qualifiers, but I've just really enjoyed watching him. I know Atlanta United fans are kind of glad that he doesn't play for the Union, so they kind of root for him as far as the Muniz men's national team is concerned. But it's been a joy watching him, and he's really asserted himself in the national team discussion. Who's next, do you think? Who are some players that, and I'll get back to the game in a little bit, but who can kind of be that next?
Referring to the Union, you mean?
Yes. Correct.
Well, I mentioned Quinn Sullivan, mm-hmm. who I like. He's a little more of an 8 than a 10, but he can certainly be an attacking player.
Sure. And
the rumor is you're going to see him with the US U20s soon enough. Brian Sciaretta, I think, was writing about that some recently. Then you got Brendan's brother, Paxton.
Yeah.
Who's, he's a young kid. He's even younger, I believe, in terms of age, but also in terms of sort of seasoning than Brendan was when he first came up. And the reason why he and Quinn Sullivan and Brandon Craig, who a lot of people don't know about, but is another academy product, the reason why they all signed as 17-year-olds is because they all had European teams, as that's happened a number of times with the Union in recent times. The Union signed their academy kids at 17, just before they turn 18 to pro deals, right, if they want to keep them, so that they don't leave for nothing and go to Europe.
Sure.
Quinn Sullivan had Dortmund looking after him. He, in fact, had went to Dortmund last year at one point. Brandon Craig has had some high-profile European teams making inquiries. I forget whether I've reported any of them by name, so I'm going to hold off of doing it here just in case.
Sure.
Because I know some of them. And Paxton Aronson shares the last name of a rather interesting U.S. national team players. Everybody knew who he was. And those of us who know people within the Union's academy have been led to believe over the years that Paxton has the higher ceiling,
right? Which
is saying something. And I think some of that was Brendan has, as I said, gone higher faster than I think even a lot of us thought he was going to. So the ceiling for Brendan has gone up. But Paxton's got a higher ceiling. And I think one of the pieces of evidence of that is he's got a little more of a shooter's instinct than Brendan had at his age, and maybe even much more of a shooter's instinct than Brendan had at his age. Brendan was a pass first. I'm gonna. You don't watch much basketball, Sydney, do you?
Not as much, much as I used to.
Well,
Mainly
he's what we would call a pass first point guard.
Sure.
And that drew some comparisons to Ben Simmons that were simultaneously flattering and unflattering. And this was before Ben Simmons had lost the faith of everybody in town by how he had played in the playoffs this year.
Right. Which Hawks fans should know all about, of course.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But Paxton Aronson has more of a shooter's instinct, as I said, at his age than Brendan did at that point. And if you go and look up on YouTube or whatnot, the goal that Paxton scored against New England, you will see some of that instinct, I think.
Interesting. Do you expect to see him in the lineup tomorrow?
I have no idea. He's usually on the bench.
Yeah, I pulled up his stats. He came off the bench against Club America. He didn't play, it looks like, against Orlando. So, we'll see what Jim Curtin has in store for tomorrow.
He can play. So he and Sullivan can play. Sullivan's stepped further down the road at this point, but
sure.
As I said, they can play. So play. They some of us would like to see them get a few more minutes.
All right.
I think Jim probably would too, but he's. You think of counter-pressing teams as attacking teams, right? The Union are a very defense-oriented team, which is why Paxton doesn't play as much.
Right.
But he made his MLS debut against Portland on May 30th in the garbage minutes of a national TV game.
Right.
And you could hear both in the stands and on TV, you could hear the fans chanting Paxton Aronson's name. They were chanting, "We want Paxton," as he was warming up. And Jim Curtin obliged them. Sorry if the lights are flickering. That's
no, it's all.
There's not a thunderstorm going on over here.
It's all right. It's all right. I barely noticed.
They've known about him, and I think they understood that he wasn't going to be ready right away. But he can play in MLS. So will he play tomorrow? I don't know, but he can.
So, what's Jim Curtin's message been to the team? Especially as the season gets later, as these matches start to go by the wayside, and this playoff push continues. What's his overall message been to the Union of late?
It's interesting. Let me also apologize to my viewers. My camera is above my head.
So you're fine.
Look up too much.
It's all good.
Then my glasses are. It's not ideal.
I can see and hear you. That's all that matters.
Right. Exactly. What's his message to his team? His message to his team is, let's make the playoffs and see what happens from there. And let's try to, finish in the top 4 so we can get a home game while we're at it to start. I think if you look at, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 right now. You could go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 if you want, but if the Union can get to 3rd or 4th, that is the difference between going to New York City at Yankee Stadium or Montreal in Montreal or Atlanta in Atlanta versus hosting any of the above.
Sure.
Then you'd have to go to New England or Nashville after that, but that's the nature of the beast. They know that, and obviously New England is going to run away with everything. So. Yeah,
Nashville too. Nashville looks like they're starting kind of to find their legs on the road. They've just had a poor way for them. It is. Gary Smith has done a tremendous job with them. So it really, like I said, the matches just really gain importance. And like I said, this is another one of those 6-pointers where both teams are pushing for that home playoff spot, and so much is on the line. So it should be a really interesting match. I have to ask you about Shabilko, Kasper Shabilko, who Atlanta fans, another player that Atlanta fans don't have fond memories of. Outside of him, outside of Shabilka, outside of Santos, who are some of the players that the Union or Atlanta kind of need to watch out for tomorrow that they'll need to key in on?
Santos is one who just has, I think, an ability to break defensive lines down that nobody else on the Union has, and they know it. And they went out and signed another Brazilian guy named Mateus Davo, he's not a big guy. He's more of a Santos type. He's more of a speed guy than a size guy, who we have not seen much of. And I think with Burke out, we might have to see a little of him tomorrow. And that probably wouldn't be a bad thing for a number of reasons, including that, he's only played a little bit, but he can play. He's quick. He'll shoot it. He'll shoot it early, which is an asset in this league. And he'll go mucking around in the spaces where a small striker can get in there and do some damage. Yeah. Is he Joseph? No. Is he Hercules Gomez with the way he was? No. And you've been around Sydney long enough. You know what I mean by that.
Yeah.
But it seems he can play a little bit, and we might see him tomorrow because Burke's going to be out. The guy who's going to have a lot of pressure on his shoulders, I think, is Daniel Gazdag, who was signed to be the DP number 10 and has he has whelmed, I would say. He is certainly not overwhelmed. I'm not going to say he is underwhelmed because the stuff he's good at is sometimes a little subtle. Right. But when you're a DP number 10 who has a track record of being a shooter and a goal scorer with Hungary, and with his clubs, then you need to shoot. You need to score. And his only goal so far for this team has come from a penalty kick. He almost had one from open play against Orlando, but he was a step offside, and so it got negated. Would have been a real nice goal too, the way the buildup was. But he needs to play big, and this would certainly be a game to play big in.
It's gotten a little chippy between these two teams.
Has it really?
Early, but what really one of the players that's kind of been in the middle of things. You wrote about him today, Jose Martinez. Do you expect sort of the fireworks that we saw earlier in the season? I know Jim Curtin, reading on MLS, Tom Bogart was quoting Jim Curtin saying he wasn't really expecting any of that since he's known Gazetta Pineda for years. and a lot of the discussion, of course, is about Jim Curtin, what a nice guy he is, a class act. He helped that family.
Oh, sorry. Okay. The fireworks was a Gabriel Heinze reference.
Yes.
Which is now off the table.
Yes.
And Jim Curtin played against Gonzalo Pineda and likes him. That was what that was about.
Right.
It matters on the field, It's so I have held Atlanta as the benchmark for the Union for quite some time now, because the Union don't spend a ton of money on players, and they don't win all that many trophies either. So I said, well, over there's a team that spends money on trophies, wins players, draws big crowds. Oh, by the way, is in a downtown stadium accessible by public transportation, which the Union are not. To my everlasting consternation. I think everybody who follows me knows that by now. And yet, the Union are good. Mm-hmm. Are they as good as Atlanta when Atlanta's on? No, probably not, but they're good. But the thing is, the history, for me, the history goes back, and forgive me, I'm going to sort of pull this up in real time.
Sure.
The history goes back not just this year. It's really about much more than that for me. And I would, not that I know this, but I would venture to say that it is for some of the players and indeed for some of the fans. I take it back to the start of 2019 when Brendan Aronson scored that goal you mentioned in his professional debut.
Exactly.
To steal a 1-1 tie down there.
Yep.
And they meet in Chester in September, almost exactly September of 19. The Union win 3-1 in one of their games of the year up here. And they played LAFC to a wild game, too, right around the same time. That was like really their peak of it. And Aronson scored in that Atlanta game, too, by the way.
Right.
So then they go down. Atlanta, the Union beat the Red Bulls in the playoffs. They go down to Atlanta shorthanded and lose. And then in 2020, the Union win the Supporters' Shield, but they didn't play Atlanta.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are all issues to worry about.
Well, but it came up. They won the thing on merit. I think everybody agrees at this point. You only beat the teams that are in front of you, and a lot of other teams, the rest of the league, didn't do that.
Right.
They didn't play Atlanta last year at all. And they went out in the first round of the playoffs, obviously. So you come to this year. They win in Atlanta in the Champions League, 3-0, which is outrageous.
Yeah.
Pretty well kill off the series by the time it comes back up here. That game's a 1-1 tie, and nobody's counting the score by the end because it's done.
Sure, yeah.
Then they go down to Atlanta in the middle of the Euros and score twice in the last 6 minutes plus however many, I think it was a half an hour stoppage time.
Yeah.
In that game or whatever it was in total,
Yep.
And Jacob Glesnes in the 93rd hits a cannonball off the crossbar, down over the goal line, back up off the crossbar, and down again or whatever it was. What was it, 2 or 3 times it hit the bar in total?
Yeah.
and the the police in Fulton County were summoned to chase down a thief.
Smash and grab.
I mean, really, literally
smash and grab.
And so now here they are, first meeting since then. That game was on ESPN. This one's on Big Univision.
Mm-hmm.
I believe, as far as I know, it's the first time that the Union are on Big Univision.
Yeah. As opposed to Atlanta, this is their second straight game on Univision.
Well, it's interesting. Atlanta's always had no small amount of interest from the Spanish-speaking population in the country because they've had Almiron and Joseph and Barco and Pidi Martinez and many number of other South American, Mexican, et cetera players.
Sure.
And they've always also, by the way, done extremely well in Spanish language public relations and marketing.
Mm-hmm. For the most part.
The Union have had, I can count on one hand, the number of dedicated Spanish language PR people they have had on their staff in their history.
Mm.
Which is a real shame because the Spanish-speaking population in this region, especially the Mexican immigrant population, does not get nearly enough respect and recognition as it should. And a number of them showed up to the Club America game in the Champions League, and a few of us would like them to perhaps come back someday. But in their defense, I think completely valid, they would like to be invited back. They would like to be, welcomed. I see nothing wrong with that.
Right.
And the Union have really rarely ever done all that much marketing to the local Spanish-speaking population. They've not had a huge number of high-profile, I don't know what the definition of Latin players is at this point, but it certainly changes from, if you think about it. They had Farid Mondragon and Carlos Valdez. That was a long time ago. They never did enough with Roger Torres back in the day. And they had Marco Fabian for a year, but they really failed to market him or such really successfully with the local Mexican immigrant population. They never really brought them on side. And I thought that was a big shame and a big missed opportunity. And Saturday is a celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month at the game. And that's all well and good, but what are they going to do the day after that? Or the year after that, or so on? And you have to, I've said this enough before, you have to have people in your front office and in your PR staff and in your marketing department and so on who have this as their job and their interest, and it's something they really want to do. And they go out and they know what neighborhoods to go to and what radio stations and TV stations and these newspapers, such as there are any left in the universe, if I may say so. But you know what I mean.
Sure.
The union haven't really done a lot of that over the years, and they certainly, in my book, haven't done enough of it.
Sure. Yeah, I just looked it up. Philadelphia, and this is the 2010 census. 12% of the population were Latino, Hispanic.
It's higher now.
This is and that was 2010. That was 2010 census.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because hold on just a second.
Sure.
Live radio, ladies and gentlemen.
There you go.
This was something that here we go. The Inquirer just a few weeks ago, mid-August, reported on. Philadelphia's population, the city, has grown to more than 1.6 million. The 5.1% increase in population during the 2010s was the largest 10-year population gain since 1950. And it was driven by immigrants. The number of people living in the city and its surrounding counties grew by 5%. The Hispanic population grew by 36%.
Wow.
The Asian population grew by 39%. They're right there.
Sure.
And I did not get to go to the Club America game because it was the night that Yom Kippur started, which was a really unfortunate sort of fluke of timing. For those of your listeners who don't know, Yom Kippur is one of the Jewish holidays.
Yep.
And it's not, I wouldn't call it a happy one. It is our Day of Atonement. It's a lot of repentance-themed things in synagogue.
Yep.
And it's a fast day, too. All Jewish holidays start the night before.
Yep.
So you fast for 24 or 25 hours. You're supposed to do it from sunset to sunset. And it ends up being 25 hours because you start before you go into services when the sun is still out.
Right.
But, people don't eat, but also a lot of us, me included, turn all of our electronics off for the 24 hours and don't work.
Sure.
That's the one night, one day of the year when I really I'm out, And I think having described it thus, hopefully your listeners who were unaware previously would understand what that's all about.
There you go. So, yeah.
But I just want to conclude real quick. In speaking to my colleagues who were there at the game, they remarked upon the number of families with kids who were Club America fans. Families from the local and probably even beyond the local, given what Club America is, Mexican immigrant population, who came to support their team and were families with kids, just like any other family with kids who might not be of Mexican descent. Do we put it politely or do we put it impolitely? Up to you. But you know what I mean.
Sure.
The families who go to Union games most of the time. One family going to a soccer game and another family going to a soccer game.
Right.
So if you're the Union and you know some of them from around here, how do you try to get them back? Do you try to get them back? Hopefully the answer to that question is yes, and not just by sort of existing, but by actually improving your marketing to the Spanish-speaking community in the region.
Sure.
There's my
And
spiel. There you go.
and definitely, as you mentioned, Hispanic Heritage Month, that becomes even more important. So, yeah, we'll see what kind of connections the union start to make from here on out with that Hispanic population in the area. Before I let you go, I have to kind of shift gears a little bit and ask you about someone in particular who you know very well. And that's, of course, Carly Lloyd.
Oh, everybody.
Listen, you guys, it's not always been a strong relationship between you and her, but at the same time, you've been able to, get her thoughts as she winds out her career. What are some of the memories you've had? And she grew up right across the river, right? So, what are sort of the memories you've had of covering her throughout her national team career?
Let me note a couple things. One, I think you know this, and some of your listeners know this, but not all of them. I'm not from Philadelphia originally.
Okay.
I'm from Washington, D.C. originally.
Okay.
Nor was I ever in person at any of Carly Lloyd's games for the Atlanta Beat, which is why I initially figured you were going to ask. We were asking me about Carly Lloyd because she used to play in Atlanta.
That's right.
My memories of her, obviously the 2015 World Cup in so many different ways. And it will be on my resume for a long time that I was looking down at my computer when she launched that shot from midfield and did not look up until the ball was almost all the way in the net. So I did not see that goal with my own eyes.
It's quite a goal.
What else? Look, time was for quite a while that I would drive out to South Jersey on some Tuesday night when her former trainer, James Galanis, would call me up and say, hey, we're out here. You want to come out and watch and chat for sure? I said yes almost every time. And some people accused me of carrying her water for a while. And my response always was the same, which was, look, if you wrote for her local newspaper, wouldn't you do the same thing? Now, that never stopped me from judging her career objectively.
Sure.
And when the time came that I felt that she had been surpassed on the depth chart of the national team, I said so, and she wasn't thrilled by that. There have been times when we have not gotten along so well. But I'm very thankful that in the last few weeks and months that has been, if not fully resolved, certainly resolved enough to the point where we're on good terms again. She spoke to me for a good long while for a piece that ran right before the Olympics that you probably read.
Yeah.
And here's what I'd say. This applies to Carly Lloyd and a number of other women athletes, but it certainly applies to Carly Lloyd. She's got an ego. Oh my gosh. This is a point that I've stood on for a long time, and I hope to continue standing on it for the rest of my career, wherever it takes me. In men's sports, take American football, for example. Some cornerback picks off Tom Brady at the 20-yard line, runs it back 80 yards for a touchdown. And he's high-stepping into the end zone the last 10 yards because nobody's going to catch him. And by the time he crosses the goal line, he's got a new shoe deal. You know what I mean, right? You know? Why should we not accord the same privileges to women athletes? And we go on around venerating men in sports, whether on the field or in the media or whatever they may be, who have big egos. But the women are not allowed to have big egos. Well, that's pretty clear, isn't it? The sexism in that is pretty clear. So for my money, the women are allowed to have big egos, and that means they're allowed to criticize me in news conferences and, say, oh, the critics don't believe in me and have an imagined chip on their shoulder. We venerate the men for it, And if you're going to say you don't like any of it, well, okay, sure. There's some people who don't like any of it with the men or the women. I get that. But what Sydney, what for your money, other than Atlanta United, what's the number one sports team in the country? All sports.
Let's say New York Yankees, right?
That's one of them. The other one was in the Dallas Cowboys.
Cowboys.
Why are the Dallas Cowboys the number one team in the country? They are the most loved and the most hated.
The personalities. I mean, Deion
Sanders, Terrell Owens,
former
Mike
Falcon in Braves.
You know?
Yep.
I grew up in Washington, so I don't much care about the Washington ex-racist football team anymore because they have lost my affinity for a long list of reasons in addition to their owner and the formerly racist nickname. But I do enjoy watching the Cowboys lose, as a lot of us do, even if we have no great affiliation in the NFC East or anywhere else. Why are the Cowboys on national TV all the time?
Sure.
Because they're either going to win and it's going to be a big deal, or they're going to lose and it's going to be a big deal. If you're a Cowboys fan who says that the U.S. women are not allowed to have big egos and run up the scores and celebrate goals however they like and this, that, and the other thing, guess what? You're a hypocrite. It makes sense to you?
Thought I'd ask you. I figured I'd ask you about Carla Lloyd. I know you have. I know you do have some opinions that you wanted to share.
I do, but it obviously, because I know Carly and because she's from here, she is the centerpiece of that conversation when it comes up with me on your show or any number of other shows I've done over the years. I know that. I'm fine with it.
Sure.
But Carly Lloyd's not the first player in U.S. women's national team history to have a big ego. Abby Wambach obviously had a big ego. Julie Foudy, Hope Solo, any number. Here's the thing that people don't realize. They all have big egos. Even the ones who you think Alex Morgan is a nice, kind person, or Sam Mewis, or Heather O'Reilly, or Rose Lavelle. Take your pick. They all have big egos. I happen to know this because I deal with them professionally some, but there's a very easy way to know that they all have big egos, which is they've made it to the U.S. national team. They have made it to the pinnacle of sport in the world, which is the World Cup of soccer.
Right.
And the Olympics too. You know? You don't get there if you think about how competitive it is to make the U.S. women's national team. And it applies to any national team in the sport of soccer, but certainly it applies to the U.S. women. You think about how competitive it is when you're a 13-year-old kid dreaming of being 30-year-old Carly Lloyd or Tobin Heath or Kristen Press or Alex Morgan or Becky Sauerbrunn or whoever.
For sure.
You have to crush people all along the way. You have to get there and then to stay there. You have to tackle them. You have to kick them in the shins. You have to shoulder charge them when you're playing against them. You have to kick the ball past your best friend who's in the goal, and you have to do it again. I'm going off here. This is something that I'm very passionate about. You have to crush people. So, of course, you're going to have a big ego.
Yeah. It's that drive to be the best. Right. That drive to be the best, certainly. And we see it. We see it all the time. Male, on both sides of the aisle. So again, if the men are going to be encouraged to have that, then I'm going to be fine with the women being encouraged to have that. Fair point. All right, Atlanta United and Philadelphia Union tomorrow afternoon, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Univision to the NA and in English on Twitter. Jonathan Tannenwald, it's been a pleasure to have you on, and thank you for coming on 5 Stripes Tonight. Talk to you soon.
Hey, man, it's my pleasure.
All right, take care. And that's going to do it for another edition of 5 Stripes Tonight. As always, you can follow me at SHWrites on Twitter, SHWRITES. Of course, for the latest Atlanta United news, analysis, and opinion, log into DirtySouthSoccer.com. SB Nation's home for all things Atlanta United. No show, by the way, next week. I'll be traveling. I'll be on the road, so no show next week. But I hope to be back the week after. Yeah, my name is Sidney Hunt. Thank you for joining me tonight. We'll see you next time on another edition of 5 Strikes Tonight. So long, everyone.